Hi, this is Dan Devlin for the Detective Dan Devlin Show. Honorable people, honorable nation. You've heard me say it before. You can't have an honorable nation if we don't decide to be honorable people. Look around you. How many honorable people do you see? Whether it's in business, whether it's in your churches, whether certainly in government. How many people actually treat others the way they want to be treated? One of our programs that we did a short time ago dealt with the Second Amendment. We've touched on it a number of times. But I want to clarify some things, and I want to go into the Second Amendment a little deeper. You should know me by now. I'm about fundamentals. If you don't get the fundamentals right, how do you expect to have anything go the way you really want it to go? So, we'll concentrate on those fundamentals. And in our last program, I was diverted a little bit to discussing some of the issues that are very close to the Second Amendment. And unfortunately, we ran out of time, and I wasn't able to complete some of the, what I would consider, more important aspects of understanding the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. As you all know, I trust, the Second Amendment says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, you're one of the people. And this so-called right to keep and bear arms has to do with you. Now, you may not choose to possess firearms. I'd like you to think about that when you have some time. And as you listen to this program, maybe you'll see things from a little different vantage point. The United States is based upon principles that we're all responsible for what we as a nation become. If our nation is falling apart, is it because of several people or several hundred people who are in Congress and in the legislatures around the country? Is it around, based upon the actions of just those people who are around government a lot and making government decisions? I trust that most of you understand that the Constitution starts out with we, the people of the United States, for a reason. And that reason is that ultimately you and your neighbors, the people in your community, they are the ones in charge. And while some people say, well, we're a republic, excuse me, we're a republic, so that means that I really don't have to do anything because our legislators are the ones who are supposed to make all the decisions. They are supposed to represent you. In order to represent you, they need to know your ideas. They need to know what's important to you, and they need to know and go by the guidelines that we've laid down for them. Now, those guidelines are found, as you've heard me say, in mostly the statement of purpose of the Constitution of the United States. You've heard me say it, and I'm going to repeat it again because you need to know it. I suggest you memorize it. It says, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Those are the reasons that it was being established. And of course, we know that the individuals it was being established for are named right there in the Constitution. I'm not going to let the opportunity go by. You know my position. Of course, it's for ourselves, the people of the United States, specifically for those who founded the nation. But it's equally for our unborn descendants in the womb who are our posterity, who we're allowing to be destroyed. Now, I took some time in the last video to go into that into some depths, but if you know me, if you know about this program, you can go to some other videos that we've done that deals more specifically with that. But we need to be people of courage, people of principle. And when we have a document that says that this Constitution is for certain individuals, and we allow their destruction, that is a nation that's headed for disaster. Now, we're dealing with that, and I want your help in dealing with that. And of course, you can get a hold of us by going to either Dan or info at FundamentalHumanRights.Org, or info or Dan at honorablepeoplehonorablenation.org, and there's other ways that you can get a hold of me. But if I don't know that you're interested in defending some of these rights, such as the Second Amendment that we're going to deal with extensively here today, it really, and I've said it in the last program, if you're not interested in defending these rights, I have no interest in recognizing them for you, because you don't care if you have them. And you won't care until you find out that you're in need of them. And then all of a sudden you'll run to people like myself or groups that are trying to defend these rights, and you'll say, I want to be involved. I get calls all the time. Well, I think it's about time I got involved. Well, how old are you? Well, I'm 55. Well, that's a great time to get involved. And certainly we can use your help, but where have you been? And of course, they've been busy doing a lot of things because we tend to be busy people, but a lot of it is nonsense. Our society has created a condition where we run around doing a bunch of things that really have nothing to do with our security, and that's what the Second Amendment is all about. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And in our last program, we talked about the fact that some people think it's really about firearms, and another group thinks it's really about establishing a militia. And while it is about those things, I've mentioned that it's really about security, because you want security. Because you don't want to be harmed. You don't want your family to be harmed. There is a right that is recognized that many people, including myself, believe are really a gift from God. But even God, how is he going to care? Is he going to force the people in our society to make sure that you have the ability to defend yourself? Rights, whether it's the Second Amendment, whether it's the First or Fourth or Fifth or Ninth, 10th, doesn't matter which we refer to, they're only good. Their effect is only felt if we make sure that other people adhere to those principles. Right now, we're not doing that. And I'm willing to bet, I don't care what your political view is on virtually any subject. I'm willing to bet that if you're honest with yourself, every single person watching this program, or even hearing about the programs that we're doing, my staunchest opponents on many issues, if they were the individuals coupled with their children or their spouses who were in trouble, who were faced with violence on the part of someone who does not give a dang about you, I'm willing to bet not only would all of a sudden the Second Amendment mean something to you, even if you don't give it any thought, you would pray that, and I should say you would wish, because if you don't believe in the Second Amendment, you wouldn't have a firearm or the tools available in order to defend yourself and innocent others. But you would pray that some good and decent person would come along and have those tools available to be able to repel those individuals who cared nothing about your rights. Many of you who have been watching, you know something about my background. I've been around violence most of my life. And there are organizations that are so opposed to violence. I make the point that there is bad violence for sure, but there is also good violence. And when you have individuals such in a war or in a law enforcement capacity, or when you're personally attacked, you will know that that threat will change your life. And depending upon how you handle that and your ability to handle that will determine your physical health, your mental health, and maybe your existence on this earth. These are real things. And I mention law enforcement and military because those individuals, not all, because many even in the military have jobs that really don't put them in conflict. And if there isn't a war going on, they may not have experienced the real thing. But those who have experienced what real violence is, they know that when it is about to happen, and you are the target of that violence, even if you're not a believer in God, and I've seen it happen, you want to know how you can communicate with God in order to plead with Him to get you out of that situation. The Constitution of the United States recognizes this. And while many people, and I agree with it to a large extent, the purpose of the Second Amendment being there is because we knew, Lexington and Concord, for example, that whole situation where we were at conflict with the leaders of what then was our nation, felt as though the people were getting out of hand. They were requesting too much. And so we have to take their firearms, their ability to defend themselves, away from them. And so the British came and they wanted to take these instruments of self-defense away from the people who were being abused. There are people in office today and people outside of government who are trying to make the people of the United States vulnerable, helpless, dependent upon them for their security. As a police officer, I can tell you, and most would agree, seldom do we arrive when the incident is occurring. Almost, and I was going to say almost all the time, but there are some times where we do arrive in the nick of time, so to speak. But more often than not, we arrive after the incident occurred. We see the bloody body on the ground. We see the people in pain and suffering because they've been brutally beaten, stabbed, or just punched till they're nearly senseless, where guns weren't even involved. And people say, well, you shouldn't have guns. Do they think that people are not going to be violent then? These are the basics of what any human beings, what any society needs to understand if it is going to be responsible for its own condition. If we want to, and other countries have done it, if we want to be vulnerable, if we want to cower and have to hide in our homes, and by the way, I've actually been involved in a program in the southwest of the nation where burglaries and attacks on individuals were getting to the point where administrators in law enforcement agencies and government got together and they said, what are we going to do about this? And someone came up with the brilliant idea, let's help fund people putting bars on their windows and doors. I probably mentioned this before, but the reality is, and the truth was, and I expressed it then, is that you're saying, let's have people come home from their jobs and their schools and lock themselves in a jail cell and allow the criminals to run free in their society. And while the people who were advocating this understood that that was true, they felt as though this is the only answer, and they followed through with that particular project. If that's the kind of society you want, make sure that we give up our firearms, because you will become so vulnerable. And again, most of the things that I talk about, I have firsthand knowledge of. And when you have people who know that they're responsible for their own security and have the tools to be able to effectively defend themselves and innocent others, when they are approached with some invasion of bad people who make it very clear that they're there to harm them, those individuals who own that property or live there take it upon themselves to address their own what? Security. They have the tools, and they don't need to wait until a police officer gets there. They know that when it really counts, they are responsible for their own security. And if by chance things go wrong in this nation, and there are people who are violating most everyone in a particular community or all over the country if things go bad, you can get together with others and you can form a militia and a group of people who will work together in order to make their community secure. But without the tools, you have no chance. Now, many people are so used to being taken care of by people within government, and they've actually experienced these situations where people in government, law enforcement officials, have arrived much too late. Deep down, they know if they had the ability, and when I say ability, if you are going to take this action, it requires responsibility. It requires you to know about these tools that you're using and to understand that you have a responsibility to handle those tools properly. Law enforcement agencies, military people, we go through all kinds of training. Civilians have that ability to go through training, to learn about how to load and work various firearms. And I think it's a good idea that if people are going to possess firearms, that they should take it upon themselves to go through that training. And if you don't, you and innocent others may be at risk. And that's what people in government often think. Well, really, they might not learn. They might not know. They might make a mistake. And because some people might do that, we say the best way is to make all the good and decent people helpless. But it goes far beyond that. I would love to say that our officials in government really have your best interest at heart. I don't think that for a minute. Having been in a number of areas of government, having seen how the courts work and the law enforcement agencies and the military and the city council, the county government, your state government and the federal government, and you look at how could they do some of the things that they do, I want to remind you, and I mentioned it before, Unfortunately, we've allowed lawyers to run this country. And people don't like to hear it, but they know that it's true. Because they run legislatures, executive positions such as governorships, oftentimes even the presidency, absolutely in the House and the Senate. The majority of these people are often lawyers. And lawyers must have conflict, confusion, pain, suffering, injustice. They need that to occur for them to make their money. Now, that's not every single lawyer. There are some lawyers who work in areas that are kind of a niche where they're not involved in those things. But the vast majority of lawyers need those things to happen. And because we have judges who are lawyers, they make sure that we have a continuing level of crime. And even our business environment is so regulated that you can do almost nothing without paying a lawyer to represent you. What does that have to do with the Second Amendment? Very important to know. If you have, and I'll repeat it because I think I mentioned it in one of our previous programs, but because you might not have seen that, when I normally do what we refer to as forums, I may have anywhere from 100 to a few or several hundred people there. And I ask if there are lawyers present, and oftentimes there's just one or two or several. And I'll turn to the people and I'll say, in a minute, you're going to understand why our society is the way it is right now. And I ask those lawyers, if we reduce crime by 50%, what would happen to lawyers? And if there's a few there, they look at each other and they're trying to decide who's going to answer that question. And normally they do. And because they know that people know them who are in the audience, they're pretty honest. And they say 50% of those lawyers would have to find other work. Now, do you think that those lawyers want to reduce crime, the pain and suffering associated with it, so much that they would have to find work in another area? Wake up. It would be nice if they were honorable people. But the fact of the matter is, and I've had personal conversations, people in government, especially in law enforcement, certainly the courts, they understand exactly that. And so oftentimes when given an opportunity to actually do something to allow the public to know that there are definite consequences for your bad action, we instead place somebody on probation or dismiss the case or give them such a light sentence that they say it was worth doing that. Because I was caught for this one thing, and I've committed 10, 12, 14 or more cases, crimes that brought me what I wanted. And so it's worth it. We have to be smarter than the people who are trying to control you. Around the world, people claim that they want to have control over their own lives. We have that if we will do what it takes in order to keep that healthy and available for us when we need it in the future. And it's our job to make sure that it is available to our descendants of the future, our posterity, who are going to want to live in freedom, who are going to want to determine their own destiny, not have to fulfill some job position or live in a certain area or be controlled by people who have taken what you have given them, which is a position in government to act on behalf of the good people of the country, and misuse that for their own personal benefit. These things are widely known. Excuse me. They are, as many refer to it, as self-evident. We all know these things deep down inside. We know, we can look at the Constitution and we can see that it names this group our posterity. And virtually all the people, when you ask them, won't even know who that group is. They will think that it's the word prosperity. We have an obligation as people of the United States not simply to say we have rights, but we need to learn about our responsibility. And that responsibility is to know why these provisions within our Constitution exist. The freedoms that you claim that you want, your religious freedom, that's now in tremendous jeopardy because if you even speak about the bad behavior of some people, you can not only be chastised, but you can be punished and even imprisoned for speaking the truth about what you believe about your religion and really common sense. Evil prevails when good men are silent. And we have too many men, in particular, women of course included, that are too silent. You need to learn about these rights, your fundamental right, that right to keep and bear arms. It is up to you to defend. And there are ways that you can do it. You can contact us at honorablepeoplehonorablnation.org. And you can put info in front of that. I'll get that message. And you tell me that you want to learn more and you want to become involved. God bless you all. This is Dan Devlin for the Detective Dan Devlin Show. Honorable people, honorable nation. This has been about the Second Amendment that allows you to adhere to the responsibilities that regardless of our government is about all of us mutually protecting each other. I'm counting on you. Have a great day. And I hope God guides you to get involved and do what needs to be done.